I don't care how annoying and incessant it is, I'm going to tell you at the beginning of every single one of my videos to keep checking out the links down in the description. Those are vulnerable communities that desperately need our help. Whatever we can do, whether it's spreading information, donating to any funds that are listed in any of those links, just whatever you can do. If you think you can't do anything, but you go to those websites and see the more detailed reasons, or detailed things that you can do to help, and you're like, oh shit, wait, I can do that. That's exactly why I put those links down in the description. Please keep checking them out. It's going to be at the beginning of every single one of my videos until you listen, so. Hello Friendsies, welcome back to my channel. Today we have another episode of Animal Crossing lore because I know that's your favorite thing in the world, and it's my favorite thing in the world, and I want to talk about it continuously because Animal Crossing is a comfort game of mine. Have I said that recently? Because it is. We're talking about Animal Crossing again today. So in this episode, I want to talk about how your player comes to town in all of the Animal Crossing games, and I want to talk about specifically one NPC who I think is very, very sweet, and if you've only played New Horizons, then you only know him from like a tiny little thing, but he's been a continuous like staple in the Animal Crossing games, and before New Horizons, he's had a much larger part in the game as a whole, so let's talk about that. So in Animal Crossing, you have always traveled to like the town or the village or the island that you end up on and end up living in. You've always traveled there, which I just think is very sweet, and you've had different modes of transportation to get to that town. There's been a couple different things introduced, but there's always been one kind of staple that New Horizons kind of really shook up because it doesn't exist: the train. In the first Animal Crossing game that ever came out, you are on a train and you meet this adorable little cat who wears like this red Argyle sweater named Rover. He's like a white and blue little cat. I'm sure I'm gonna have a picture of him. He is the sweetest thing in the world, and he is the one that kind of like sets up your game. So it kind of is more of an immersion thing. Instead of you having to go to a menu and like set the date and time and like customize your avatar, your player character. Huh. It kind of really immerses you in the game because he sits and talks to you. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, like, hey, do you mind if I sit across from you? That's always his thing. He always wants to sit across from you because he's a very friendly little boy. He sits across from you and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, you know, like my clock's off. Do you know what time it is? And that's how you set the date and time. And then he asks you different questions. He kind of like drums up a conversation with you and asks you different questions. And is kind of like, oh, well, like, do you consider yourself, like, what are the options? It's like brave or more like secluded, like things like that. And that's how in the older games you customize your character. And I know in New Horizons, if you've never played any of the Animal Crossing games before, in New Horizons you get that like limited menu of options, but then as you play the game you get like a wider range of options that you can customize your character. You didn't get to do that. The closest thing you got later in life was Shampoodle, but you got what you got and that was it with Rover, because you'd have to look up guides. I remember having to look up the guides on how to get like a certain eye shape and a certain like nose shape, and it was kind of silly. But that's how you would come into town, and Rover would kind of help you become who you are as a villager. Rover, unfortunately, was not part of Wild World. I believe he was part of Wild World, but he wasn't part of you coming into town. When you came into town in Wild World, he was replaced with a taxi, and Cap'n was running the taxi and he drove you into town, and Cap'n did the whole conversation thing. And I do have a soft spot for Cap'n. He's kind of annoying in the older games, but in New Leaf he really developed, and I'll make a whole different episode about him at some point. But Rover was replaced by Cap'n in a taxi. And then in New Leaf, right? Was it New Leaf after Wild World? Hold on. City Folk. City Folk was where I was going with that. Oh my god, I can't believe I missed City Folk. That was my first Animal Crossing game. I'm having a day. In City Folk, Rover comes back, but it is not a train this time. There is a train in your town in City Folk, but it is not a train that you come into town on. You come into town on a bus. And Cap'n is driving, but Rover is on the bus with you. And again, he sits, I think he sits either directly next to you or like, you know how on some buses you get on and it's like the driver's seat, and then there's kind of like a little seat that faces into the bus? I think he sits on that, and he sits and again has the same conversation with you. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, you know, my time is off. Do you know what time it is? He has that whole conversation with you, and he's just a very sweet little man to be having conversations with. And also you see him in Wild World, and I believe in City Folk as well, on certain nights, he sits at the cafe and he just has conversations with you, and he's like, wow, this town was like a really good choice on your part. It's a very nice little town. I have a soft spot for it. I'll definitely be traveling back here. So it just makes you feel good because you're like, oh my god, my little friend. And then in New Leaf, he comes back, and so does the train. The train comes back, and the train is actually driven by Porter, who is a sweet little monkey boy, and I think he's the cutest. But the train is back, and again, Rover has that same conversation with you. And the reason why I love Rover so much is because just like a couple different elements, like the fact that he's a cat. I am a cat person. I love dogs very much, but I have cats, and cats are more of my energy. He's a cat, first of all. He has the cutest little name. Usually you wouldn't think of the name Rover for a cat, but it kind of plays into his whole, like, he's a traveling little man. He wears his little sweater, and he's just a constant in most of the Animal Crossing games, and he has, like, a background and a history with the game. So if you are somebody that's been playing the Animal Crossing franchise from the very beginning of Animal Crossing, it's like it's a constant, and it's like a little comfort man, and I adore him. I adore Rover so much. He does not get enough attention. But yeah, he comes back in New Leaf, and so does the train, which is nice because I thought the bus was cool in City Folk. Like, don't get me wrong, City Folk was the first game I ever played. I thought the bus was dope as hell. I never got to use the train because at the time that I was playing City Folk, none of my friends were, because I was like really late to the game with City Folk. So none of my friends were playing it, so I never got to really use the train, so I never got an appreciation for it. But then when I started loving Animal Crossing and really looking more into the history of it, I was like, oh my god, that's so cool that you always take a train! So the train coming back in New Leaf was like awesome. And I saw a thing on Tumblr a long time ago, because in New Leaf, in your town, there was the train station, and then there were little train tracks, and you would have to cross them to go into your town. Like the Main Street, that's what it was called. You'd have to go across it to go into Main Street, and sometimes the train would go by, and nothing would happen. It wasn't like your friends were visiting. Obviously your friends would come in on the train if they visited, but it would just go by. It was just like a little extra animation that kind of like was a cute thing to add to the game. Sometimes the train would go by, and I saw this thing on Tumblr years and years ago about how, do you ever wonder when the train goes by if it's somebody else moving to their new town? And it like made me cry, because I was like, oh my god, that's so cute. And I want to wave to the train as it goes by and be like, good luck being a mayor. I always just thought that was sweet. And then if you think about it that way, it's like, and Rover helps each and every one of them. Rover, it like gives them a little pep talk, and it's like, good luck, you're gonna be great. So it makes me smile. And then New Horizons, again, I absolutely adore New Horizons, but because I have been playing Animal Crossing since City Folk, I do have certain things that I do and don't like about New Horizons. And one of the things I have mixed feelings about is how you get to your island. I mean, obviously with the island element, they switched it up, and you would take the seaplane because that makes complete sense with that kind of formula. You take the seaplane, and Timmy and Tommy are the ones that, you know, have the conversation with you, like, oh, I'm sorry, like, what is your date and time and all that stuff, and they, you know, you customize your character. You don't really do it through conversation with them, which I know is a lot easier, and is definitely made for people that don't want to have to, like... New Horizons is a lot more accessible in a lot of ways, which I'm not upset about. Because you customize your character. For me, it's not as immersive, but again, it's so much more accessible to people that way, which I totally understand. You customize your character, and then Timmy and Tommy, you know, put you on the seaplane, and I love the dodos, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love them. I think they are the funniest things. I love, which brother is it? Which dodo brother is it that when he takes you to islands, he's like Delta Oscar Whisker, like, I love him, he's so sweet, and I just think they're both very cute, but it does make me miss Rover. And is Captain in, I can't say his name, is Captain in New Horizons? If he is, I don't remember off the top of my head. I miss him, especially after, like, when you come from New Leaf to straight to New Horizons. I miss him a lot. And I personally really dislike that the only time you see Rover is doing the Mayday maze. I hate that. Because it gives him maybe a couple seconds of dialogue and nothing else. He does kind of do that cute thing where he's like, huh, you kind of look familiar. And then I love his suitcase because it has all these other stickers on it. So if you've been playing, it's like one of those old-fashioned suitcases that have like the like when you go somewhere and your passport gets stamped, it has the stickers that look like that. Which I do like about that, because it's cute, because if you've been playing Animal Crossing for previous games before New Horizons, that you can kind of be like, oh my god, and you know, that was my village and that was my town and this and that. But I wish Rover had more. Like, I wish that he was one of those NPCs that like came to your island. Not, he doesn't have to do anything, in my opinion. Like, I know a lot of the NPCs that come to your island benefit you in some way, like Gulliver, Leaf, LaBelle. I always want to call her Label. LaBelle, Wisp, Celeste, like Sahara, Red. I know they come to your town for like specific things, but I would honestly every once in a while love to just see Rover like wandering around your island and just make little comments about like maybe kind of alluding to it like he does in the May Day parades, where he's like, something about you is familiar and this and that, and I just wanted to come check this place out. You're doing a good job with it. Because that's kind of always what Rover's been. And I just think it's really sad that you can only see him once a year. Because he was a huge part of the Animal Crossing, you know, like, he was who you encountered. He was the first one when you would come to town, and he was always there to, like, give you an encouraging word, and literally be part of shaping your character. I miss him a lot. Rover is best boy. He definitely does not get enough appreciation, and I want you guys to appreciate him. So here's the history of Rover and the history of coming to your town, because I think it's a pretty cool history. If you've only ever played New Horizons, like, I'm not shaming you, I'm just saying, I think it's really cool because they've literally done planes, trains, and cars. And I think the whole aspect of traveling to your village, like, once you get into your village, your town, your island, obviously you do other elements of traveling, but you always return to your island. So I think it's cool that at the very beginning of the game, you're always coming from somewhere else, because it makes you wonder, like, where are you coming from? I like to think of it as, well, it's nothing like The Sims, and it's nothing like Stardew Valley because you don't have children in Animal Crossing, but I kind of like to think of it as every new game that I play, it's like the child of my previous character, because I think that's kind of cute. And back in the day, there were always people making like comics and stories on Tumblr about city folk and New Leaf, so it kind of makes me think back to those. But yeah, that was the history of Rover and how you would get to town in Animal Crossing and all the other Animal Crossing games. And I love Animal Crossing. You're gonna keep getting videos like this. Maybe not in November and December, because I think I'm doing like one a month. Maybe not in November and December. I haven't decided yet, but I really do adore Animal Crossing. I plan on getting an Animal Crossing tattoo at some point. It just, you know, costs money. But it's so important to me, and there's some stuff going on behind the scenes that are going to affect the channel in a good way, and I might be able to show you my Animal Crossing town, my Animal Crossing village. I keep calling it a town. Oh my god, village isn't right either. Island. I might be able to show you guys again, because literally, remember when I made that video showing you my island, and it was really crappy because it was filmed on this camera and I was like holding my Switch and my hands were shaking? Literally the day I made that video, I was talking about, oh yeah, like, you know, my kitchen's like really empty, but I have a whole plan for it. The day I finished filming that, doing like different trades and stuff, I was able to completely finish that kitchen. So, I've been meaning to show you guys my island for the longest time, and just things have not worked out, and other videos have come along, but hopefully with some stuff going on behind the scenes, I will be able to show you my island soon and do some other stuff with you guys. So thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! How do we feel about the pink and blue for my little pony shirt?